All right, listeners, we are back with yet another edition of the Digging Deeper podcast, and I'm here with the duo simply known as the Bryans. To my right, Brian Lucas. How are you today?
Doing well.
All right, a relatively frequent flyer here on the Digging Deeper. Got you here a few more times than normal.
More than normal lately, yeah.
Yes, which that's wrapping up now because you made a pledge to be on more during the series, and we're almost done. But my heart was very warmed that you decided to.
Maybe this will be my last appearance on Digging Deeper.
Maybe. To my right, he's never been here before, but there's a good chance that if you live in Grants Pass, you're familiar with the Mr. Brian Boteller.
Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I am much better than I deserve. Brian, you spell yours with an I, right? Mm-hmm. That's right, the correct
The right way.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll listen to an argument about the why.
Ordained by God way. Yep.
Have you guys ever met a Brien?
I have no. I've seen O'Brien spelled
O'Brien,
that way,
right.
but I've never seen
never
Brian
a Brian
that
with
way.
an E. Yeah. And here's to hoping, I guess we never
There
do.
you go. Absolutely meaningless stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Well, I am excited to have you guys on here. Brian, as the campus pastor, you taught on this weekend, but the other Brian, Mr. Boteller, for those listeners that don't know, you are if I'm correct, the director of the Grants Pass Gospel Rescue Mission.
The official title is Director of Residence Services. I have an executive director over me.
You have a boss.
Yep, I do. And then I've got a board of directors, so I've got lots of bosses.
You have a boss's
guy. Yeah, and then I'm also the executive director of the Rock Food Pantry, the Reaching Our Community Food Pantry, which is kind of shares some property, shares a property piece together there on Foundry Street.
Right.
So, and I'm also on the board of directors for the Grants Pass Sobering Center. So I deal a lot with kind of a lot of the same group of people and the same topics and stuff.
So when we're on a podcast focusing on this idea of poverty, you are the guy that we want on the podcast, and you were the guy that we had teach out at Rogue River this weekend, which was good to have you there.
You guys were incredibly generous, and I got to tell you, having pastors like Mark, ask me, "Hey, can you send me your notes before we go?" I was so humbled, and then of course, watching his message also and finding the plugs. I mean, thank you, River Valley, to all the support for the Gospel Rescue Mission and what we do.
Oh yeah, definitely something that we believe in. And speaking of plugs, wanted to take a quick opportunity. We're not the only ones with the podcast. You have something by the name of Mission Live.
We do.
It's a video. I don't know if it's exactly a podcast.
Well, it's a video podcast kind of format. It is Mission. You can find us at missionlive.net, and it is it's an hour-long program. We've been doing it on Mondays. We may change it up. I got to tell you, it's a lot of work, but we talk about homelessness in the news. We talk about what's going on around the mission. We actually interview live mission, actual homeless residents, and everything to find out about their experience, what's going on in their lives. We will interview other ministries that are dealing with the same kind of population in and around Southern Oregon. And then we'll give like resources to make book recommendations and that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun.
All right, and again, that link will be in our resources. If you are part of our newsletter, we will have access to where you could get that, unless you just want to go to missionlive.net.
Missionlive.net. You can find everything also at grantspassmission.org.
Yeah.
So made it real simple. Where did he say? grantspassmission.org. See there? Doesn't it sound good?
Ooh, that sounds like one of those commercials.
Did you ever used to be a DJ?
I spent about 2.5 years in radio in my early 20s, and everybody reminds me of that all the time. Yeah.
I believe it. I believe the radio DJ voice for sure.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys have been following us through Digging Deeper, we've basically just had 2 easy prompts that have guided our conversations here. As the teacher, what is something that you enjoyed in your studies that you did not get to share in your message? And then questions that were brought up. And we have the pleasure of having a lot of frequently asked questions that you are asked. So we're going to be going through some of those. But first, for you guys in your studies, what was something that just didn't quite make the cut in your teaching? Brian,
you want me to go
no,
first?
You've been talking a lot, so
yeah.
actually...
Well, I mean, talk about like somebody who had 18,000 things you could have put in a 5-thing bucket. So I'm curious, what's your like top thing that you weren't able to fit in?
Well, when you're thinking about if you're thinking about poverty, first of all, I mean, there is so many different angles you can hit this thing from. What is it? What is it compared to what is American poverty compared to global poverty? What does God have to say about it? But the flip side to that is, what is generosity? What does it mean to be generous and merciful and just and kind? These are all kind of linked together. So we could have gone down any of those rabbit trails and gone for hours on any of those things. For me, I get a lot of kind of how-to questions, or I get a lot of outrage. Unfortunately, I get a lot of people who think that for some reason that if Jesus were doing the gospel rescue mission, it's usually the armchair quarterback who wants to sit there and say, you guys should be doing this differently, and it's almost always, you should do away with your rules and requirements, you should do away with any expectations, you should certainly not make them listen to the gospel in there. And it's funny, I hear this from Christians sometimes. And so, they just have this idea, we have this idea, and I think it's kind of been born out of the... it's been attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. It says, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. And it's like, and I go, well, that's kind of like saying feed people always, and if necessary, use food. That's just, to me, it's silly. And yet, if I scold the person saying it in a way like I just said, now I'm just hurting their feelings, and they're shutting me off, and they're not hearing me. And that's part of the challenge, is communicating that truth, in a way that they can receive thoughtfully and not, they'd have no idea how much frustration they're causing. When I go, when somebody gets, say, leaves the mission because they were angry with the rules of the mission and whatnot. And of course, they're angry. They're oversimplifying why they left the mission. And they're not telling their component what they did to bring this about and everything. And then what I get is an angry Christian, sometimes an angry pastor, yelling at me and my staff about, well, how could you do that? And why would you do this? And it doesn't make sense. And after all, what would Jesus do? It's like the big trump card. What would Jesus do? And I end up kind of going, well, so you're telling me that Jesus would have just let them stay with no rules and no expectations to change of any kind, because it's cold outside or because it's hot outside or whatever the condition is. And they'll tell me, yes. And I'll go, well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm convinced that Jesus wouldn't. But since you are convinced, well, now you're in a dilemma. And my recommendation is, in order for you to stay faithful to Jesus, is that you open up your home to them and that you let them stay at your house. And immediately they start backpedaling, because what they really wanted was for me to follow what they think Jesus would say, but not for them to follow what they think Jesus would say. So you're in this kind of tension all the time, due to really a lot of oversimplifications. Poverty's complex. How somebody got there. If there's 1,000 homeless or impoverished people in our community, every one of them has an absolutely different story than the next one. You'll have 1,000 different reasons, and the only way that you're going to find out what they are is by taking the time to get to know them. And that doesn't come quickly. That means you have to really invest time and effort and energy into them, and so that's part of the challenge.
Right, and we are going to dig into that complexity a little bit, because it does surround some of the questions we're going to ask. But before we get to that, what did you leave on the...
Sorry, I rabbit trailed.
No, I don't think
That's why you're here. Yeah,
Actually,
I'm pretty sure the only reason I'm here is Tim meant to send you the invite to Digging Deeper.
Those Brian's on my contact.
But it's because it hit me first. He's like, well, I guess we might just have to have both of them.
Brian, you have a face for the video. You have a wonderful smile. You have a good beard. That's why. Not
true,
your
man.
heart.
We are intimidated
Well,
by the beard. man.
enjoy
That
my
was really
last
good.
digging deeper appearance. No, one thing that I think I got one sentence out towards the end as I was trying to finish, but I really do think that our Uganda mission is a really just cool thing that as a church, because like you were saying, poverty in the U.S., is it here? Absolutely. But there's also a lot of really really different poverty all around the world, and the amount of people that our kids in Uganda ministry has been able to impact, that literally provide food where there's no food and clothing, but also in a way where they're getting them an education, they're building the school, and then even some of the job training that they're doing. Just really. Phil was over there not too long ago, and just the amount of thousands of lives that are touched, and just how that I think that's one of those stories that we probably won't know till we get to heaven, like how many people of like this life touched this family, and it kind of exponentially just changed.
Absolutely. I did mention on Sunday the Uganda mission there, and I've done work personally in Uganda on my own, and I can tell you right now, poverty there is at a level that it just, the American mind has no way of even coming to grips with it. It's we will ask American questions to Ugandan poverty, and unless you are familiar with what it's like on the ground there, every answer you throw at it's going to be wrong. You really have to address Ugandan poverty from a Ugandan angle. You can bring Western thinking and ideas and ingenuity and all this kind of stuff, but you have to teach them and change you have to give them an education that there's no other way for them to get. And that's why what Tom and the guys are doing over there is absolutely fundamentally the right thing to do. Start with the kids, build it out that way. It's a breathtaking to think of what gets done through River Valley. I'm just stunned at the numbers over there, and I can't wait to be a part of it. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you guys said. See, I can just sit back and let you guys talk. That's great dialogue. It's the Bryans. You're gonna take this on tour. You're just gonna be the Bryans.
It's the Brian Show.
Yeah. Which
we need a theme song.
We were talking about before. You guys are both musically talented. You guys could be a band. If the whole, mission director or pastor thing doesn't work out, think about being a band. Bands are big. But I digress. That's my my transition to the next part. I want to look at some questions that even maybe I've been asked before, or you guys have been asked. Before we get to the stuff on my list, did Brian, Mr. Lucas, did you have any questions that were kind of brought up to you from people after your message?
No. Yeah. It's I think. Yeah, just there could have been a lot of questions because there is that depth of the topic, but
when you speak with the kind of clarity that you speak with, there's no questions left, brother.
That's true.
I just left like a minute before the service was over.
Just
nobody could ask me anything.
Yeah, he actually said, "Bow your heads, let's pray." Had an audio recording of him praying.
That's great.
And then boom, he was just gone.
That's the Murphy goodbye.
Learn from him. I love that.
So there's a theme with a lot of the questions that we've kind of come up with, or that I have, and it's something that we're going to be talking about in that complexity of the overarching thing, grace versus enablement. And I know that's something we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and the idea of how do I know what to give to who and how. I think that's the overarching thing, and I think if we just talk about that, we're actually probably covering these 6 questions I have. But I do just want to bring up a few things that you had brought up, Brian. This idea that Jesus never challenged anyone about their poverty, but simply gave to everyone who came to him. So I just ask myself, what would Jesus do? And I give. And I think you kind of addressed that earlier, but
Yeah, well, so we just over this last year went through a study through John. In fact, we interrupted our study through John to jump into this, and we were in John chapter 6, where Jesus just gets done feeding the 5,000, and the next day, he's on the other side of the lake. They all go over and follow him, and they're following him, and he calls them out on it. He says, "You guys were following me for food, but you weren't following me for the right reason, for me. And what I have is more important. In fact, it's the food that leads to eternal life," kind of thing. So there's a great example of where Jesus doesn't give everything to anybody who asks. And in fact, in the previous chapter, in John chapter 5, we have the time that Jesus goes down to the sheep gate pool, and says there's a multitude of people with infirmities gathered around the pool, waiting for the water to be disturbed and everything. Jesus goes down to one of them and says, "You want to get healed?" Now here you are. Jesus is doing something that none of us would do if we were Jesus. If we were Jesus, we'd go, "Hey guys, I'm Jesus. You're all healed. Thank you very much. Be here all week. Try the veal," or whatever. And instead, Jesus walks down to one of them. And he asks them, even though it should be obvious he wants to be healed, he asks them. He makes them say it. "Of course I want to be healed. I can't get down to the pool fast enough," And so this idea that Jesus would go and heal everybody, that he healed everybody, and that he gave food to everybody who came in. He healed lots, and he fed lots of people, and he did all kinds of miracles, so much that John says if he had all the paper in the world, it wouldn't have fit in the book, right? But he didn't heal everybody. And that same Jesus is still on the throne today. He's the king of the universe. He could still do all of that. Some people he heals today. Some people he feeds almost miraculously. In fact, I would say miraculously. And some people he lets sit in squalor and suffering. Some people he allows to go through tragedies and difficulties that I can't even begin to fathom what they're having to deal with. That same good Jesus who's on the throne, who's all powerful, he's not inhibited by anything. Do anything he wants. He could stop it all right now, but he doesn't. So when I look and go, what would Jesus do? Well, I think we're seeing what Jesus would do. And the real question is, well, what am I going to do? I just want to make sure that what I'm going to do is going to be the thing that's consistent with his word. I want to do something that's right. If somebody, and that's why I try and divide out those who are there who are poor because of foolish behavior, and those who are poor because of circumstantial things that are outside of their control.
Yeah, and that was the anchor of your teaching at Rogue River this week.
Right.
Yeah.
So for more, see the notes. Yeah, right. But that's basically where I was going with that. Yeah.
Well, and you had shared this quote with Mark.
Yeah.
And then he shared it with the other teachers.
Yeah.
And this quote of poverty, like the unrighteous type of poverty, working like God's natural law.
Yeah.
So leaving people to reap what they sow, and how God has built this into the fabric of reality as a means of correction.
Yeah.
And so, these things, hunger, cold, the hard ground, are actually supposed to get people, like the way God's designed it, to get people back on the right path, and that we can undermine God's intention when we try to help them circumvent the things that God's put in place to bring them back to so it's so I actually had a couple of people comment afterwards. I shared the idea of that quote, and it was like, I've never,
Nice. Well, it was one of my good moments, I guess. I came up with something smart to say. The thing that's really frustrating, when working with people who are dealing with drug addictions or dealing with simple behavioral issues that are sinful behavior in one way or another, nothing's more frustrating than you're working with them. I mean, part of what makes the Gospel Rescue Mission work is I have a level of leverage on them that hey, man, have a nice place to stay and food, 3 hot meals a day, and your laundry done for you twice a week, and it's cool in the summer and warm in the winter, and all these good things, good counsel all around you. It's going to require something of you. You're going to have to behave a certain way. I'm looking for a good behavior, and you're going to have to contribute to your stay here in some ways that are commensurate with what you're capable of and everything like that. And when somebody tells me or my staff to go kick rocks and they're sick of this place and blah blah blah, and we go, oh, okay, but you can't talk to us that way and stay here and everything. And then they go, oh, that's fine, I'm out of here. And they march right down to the next Christian ministry that gives away free things indiscriminately or less discriminately. And they'll go, yeah, the mission kicked me out, and because there are a bunch of jerks out there. Y'all have heard how bad they are and everything. And well, it's all true. They're just as bad as all that. And Christian ministry says, oh, well, you got nowhere to go? Yeah, I got nowhere to go. Okay, well, we'll put you up in a hotel room for 3 nights. What they got was a reward for their bad behavior instead of a just penalty for that thing. And it wasn't a penalty designed to be a permanent thing. It's just designed to correct the behavior. Look, if you want to behave that way, go live that way and see what the consequences are, and let the consequences bring the correction. Remember, in the passage where Paul is talking about, and I think it's in 1 Corinthians, where Paul is talking about an immoral brother in the church who's doing something really bad, and he puts them. He says to put them out, let Satan have his way with them, so that in the end you may gain a brother. Right? The purpose for the putting them out of the church and letting them feel the weight of the loss of community and the loss of relationship and the benefits that all come with that is so that it would cause them to mourn that and change their ways and want to come back and receive, welcomed back in. And that's what he would, in fact, in 2 Corinthians, he's saying, and you did what I said, and that's what happened, and you regained a brother, and congratulations, good job. So that's kind of the idea in some of that for the person who is homeless. And I know Pastor Mark spent a lot of time focusing on particularly homelessness because obviously it's a plague right now in our community. And so I think that's when we think of poverty, a lot of times we think of homelessness. It's not the only way that poverty is expressed in our community at all. But it's one that's really visible and real troublesome to us, I think. And so this is a way that we can go, okay, how can we change behavior? And we're the only ones, the Christian community is the only ones that are going to actually address correcting a change of behavior, because the world right now is in a place where if you say your behavior is wrong, they will go, you can't say that. That's discrimination. You're making a judgment call on their lifestyle choices and everything like that. And we, from a biblical worldview, would say, no, there are good and bad choices. There are righteous and evil choices. All of these things, and our job as Christians is to help people repent of their wickedness and come to faith in Christ and change their ways and course correct. And we're the only ones that can really speak into that. Ask a counselor in the secular counseling community, why should I stop using drugs? And they're going to give you only social benefit reasons. Okay, all they can point to. They can't point to a moral compass because they can't say it's wrong to use drugs. And you go, but you might die. You go, well, so what? I want to die. Well, but you'll lose all your friends. Well, I hate everybody. Who cares? and they end up just kind of going, well, I can't. These normally work as answers, and you're defeating me, drug addict or whatever, because I don't care about my choices. Well, they don't care about their choices because they don't have to. If their choices lead to misery, and if it leads to harm and destruction, the Christian community can speak to this. We can go, oh man, your misery, what was done to you that has caused you to bring a place where you hate, despise life and reality, it was unjust. It was wrong. What happened to you was actually evil. We can actually say that there's good and evil, and we can address those things. In the same way with poverty, we can say, hey, look, you were made for something better, and it not only will, when you follow a different path, you will flourish, and through your flourishing, it'll not only be a blessing for you, but you'll benefit others around you too, because that's the reason God blesses us, is to be a blessing to others, right? So, yeah, sorry. There you go, rabbit trail.
I was taking mental. I think the only comment that I would add to that, I do think secular counselors would also probably be able to speak to you said the social ramifications, which I would agree with, but also secular counselors I'm thinking of that have been kind of trained in psychology probably would be able to speak to the physical and mental damage those would have on your brain.
But again, but that's assuming that you care about those things,
right?
I mean,
yeah.
and so you tell the drunkard, or you tell the person who's committed to some kind of intoxication. You tell them it's doing you damage. Their problem most of the time isn't that they don't have enough information. The problem it's not like, didn't you know that smoking's bad for you? What? Wait a minute, it actually is bad for me? And we almost always go towards that level of discussion about it. Well, it's bad for you. Well, okay, but I don't care.
Right.
Then what? Okay, then your argument's no good anymore, and that's why me telling both parents, as a kid, that it's bad for you, stopped at about the time I was about 10, because I realized that about 10 they didn't care about any of this stuff, and it wasn't then I was just scared all the time for my parents, but it's a whole different thing. Sorry.
No, it's good. I do want to get to some of the other questions though before we hit dinner time.
There you go.
But again, this is good stuff. So, and what I'm pulling from talks that we've had is that we definitely need to probably take a firm stance on how we interact with people that are in poverty. But it does circle around discernment and relationship. I do think that's something that's really important. Which I think it's good to clarify that you're not just sitting there saying, yep, nope, like getting to actually know these people, know their motives, and operating out of that. And so I do have a few questions that stem from that. The first one, how do you tell the difference? So the backstory, your 2 points were there are people in poverty whose decisions got them there.
Yep.
And that's where when you kind of speak about this firm front, it's with people that have made decisions to get them there, and you're wanting to be able to lovingly help them get out, but through tough love.
Yeah, and it still needs to be gracious. I mean, you need to be long-suffering. You have to be long-suffering in this process.
There's that category, and then people by circumstances out of their control are into poverty. So a good question would be, how do I tell the difference between the two? If I'm, and it's kind of probably a bigger unpacking question. Another one could be, what is my responsibility when I wrote down with the homeless camps that I walk by?
Sure.
What's my responsibility to them? Because if I'm gleaning from your instruction, you shouldn't enable somebody who is in that circumstance by giving them $5. But then obviously we want to be gracious to those that are in there out of their control. How do we have that discernment?
Well, part of it might come from a question. If you asked the question differently, if you said, how do I do? If I see people with cancer, what's my job to do? How do I minister to somebody with cancer? And I would say, well, it'd begin with, how much do you know about cancer? What are you really bringing to the table with somebody with cancer? How far are you willing to go before you even start? How far are you willing to go? Because cancer is expensive to work your way through and find somebody out. Do you want to become an expert on cancer, and everything? Then, you got a lot of work ahead of you, a learning curve to get to. But or do you want to support somebody who is, and everything? So I could learn about all the childhood cancers out there, or I could support a St. Jude's Children's Hospital or something like that. I would say that we live in a time where all the world's tragedies are right there in front of us on our cell phones, right? Okay, and as God's people and as a compassionate people, we have a natural. We hurt for those who hurt, we mourn for those who are mourning. And so now we see the mourning of the whole world in front of us. And as individuals, a lot of times we take it on and we think it's my responsibility personally to solve the suffering of the whole world. And I go, what if we were a little more cautious and a little more strategic? What if we said, there's things that I can do and that I'm willing to do with my life, that I'm willing to engage with. And a lot of that will have to do to the proximity of the people that I'm looking to help. I mean, if it's a stranger in the park, I might not be as helpful as it would be, and I may not be as willing to be helpful as it would be as if it's a family member or something like that, right? Or somewhere in between, a member of my church or something. And so I think that's part of the issue that we need to deal with. So, and then the other is if we realize that, man, I might be just out of my league, there's nothing wrong with just going, you know what, I'm going to support somebody who actually does the right thing. So, for example, I have taken, because I drive up to the intersection at over by Walmart at the Taco Bell there, right? You know exactly where I was talking about. Yeah. And I'm over there and I see a guy, a gal, a little kid, a dog, and a sign. And they all look terrible. And your heart goes out because you're at least, if you care about none of them, you care about the dog. The little kid. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. I knew you were going to say the dog. I love it. Yeah. So, and so you want to do something, right? You really want to do something. The question is, what am I going to do? And if I give them money, I have no guarantee that I'm going to do anything other than potentially satiate a very short-term need that is, if they do the best thing that they could possibly do with it. But I'm telling you right now that somebody who's in that position, already by being in that position, that tells you that they are not somebody inclined to do the best thing with everything that comes their way. That's how they got there. Whether it's because they're bad people, or it's because they're foolish, or it's because they're there by some kind of catastrophe. That's not the way out of catastrophe. And so, but our heartstrings are pulled nonetheless. So we sit there, and a lot of times what I've done is I roll down my window and I say, hey, you guys, I feel terrible about where you're at right now, and I'm thinking about you. I've got some money, but I'm not going to give it to you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down to the Gospel Rescue Mission, and I'm going to start a tab in your name, basically. I'm going to pay for you, your girl and kid there, and you're going to have to find something to do with the dog, but I'm going to pay for them. I'll even pay for a friend for 30 days. You'll have 3 hot meals a day for 30 days, and all you got to do is go there, and I'll take care of you. Now, most of the time when I do that, they're going, mission, I'll never go to the mission. And I go, okay. Well, you might as well at least tell a friend, because I did feel bad for you a second ago. Now I don't. But tell a friend, because I'm still going to do it. I'm going to give the money there. It's going to be there. What's your name? And I'm going to tell them that I put it in there. There's a spot for you there if you want it. But you have to want it and everything. Now I've just done something. I've helped me discern real quickly between the two. Okay? So I've done something that really will. And I've put the money in something, into an organization that is really efficient with their funds and then really does something phenomenal with their funds. And they deal with these kinds of people all the time. So I've given it to the professionals because what I don't have is time to pull over, get to know them, sit down, have a picnic with them, ask their life story, try and figure out if what they're telling me is even true, and all this stuff. And I can't tell, most people can't tell just by looking if somebody's a drug addict or, whatever. And there may not be a whole lot of tells. But the folks at the Gospel Rescue Mission, this is what they do. This is what we do all the time. And we'll walk with them, we'll work with them. We don't expect perfection. We really are looking for reasons to keep them there, not looking for reasons to kick them out. So it's a constant place. If they want a place to find their way out of poverty, they are so good at it. This organization is so good at it that 1 out of 4 people that walk through the doors will leave with a job and a home. And that is no exaggeration. I've got the numbers to prove it and everything. And it's been this way for years. So that means that we fail 75% of the time. On the other hand, but what we don't tell you is that 1/3 of those who leave will circle back around, and they'll try it, and they'll be part of those winning groups that come back through and everything. So it is life-changing. And I know that there are people that will be watching this today that have benefited from the mission themselves, that will tell you. And if you're out there, say yes and amen. Throw a comment and something in the links and stuff. But I'm telling you, we are changing lives. And literally, I can't go to a business anywhere in town where I don't run into somebody, or church anywhere in town where I don't run into somebody who used to stay at the mission, who is now doing really well. And we may not have been the sole, I'm not saying we fixed it all. We wrap around a team of people that fixes it all, including River Valley. You guys welcoming people into your churches, your congregations, loving on our people. I was so grateful to hear Mark last Sunday just, loving on the folks that were coming in and talking to them about it and everything. And Mark has always been just such a cool guy. We've got such great leadership here, and with hearts in the right direction. But that's part of how it gets there.
Yeah.
So,
any thoughts on that?
Nothing to add to that.
Yeah. And again, I think for me, I'm a big summarizer, and so what I'm kind of hearing you speak for is intentionality in what we're doing.
Yeah.
And speaking against maybe just kind of flippantly giving. Take the time, or be intentional with giving to somebody that is taking the time.
Yeah. Don't be tricked by your own false sense of guilt. There are things that happen to us in life where we will take on a sense of false guilt that's not appropriate. So, in the same way, if somebody's sexually assaulted, everybody around them feels guilty and ashamed, including the person who was sexually assaulted, and none of them did the thing that was shameful. None of them were guilty, but they all feel it. And that's a false guilt and a false sense of shame that's inappropriate and doesn't belong. When you see that person holding up that sign, what's happening is you're not uncomfortable, but you see them and they're uncomfortable. And you start to feel bad because of it. You're clean, they're dirty. You have means, they appear to not have any, and everything like that. And suddenly you're feeling guilty, you're feeling bad, and you're feeling ashamed, and you want that to go away. So what do we do? Well, what's the cost to make that go away? How much money do I got? I'll throw in $10 and everything like that. Oh, I'm a good person, and I drive away and everything. I didn't help them. I didn't give any lasting help to them, but man, I can drive away and I can actually tell myself, I can talk about it in home group, and say, oh, I was really generous this week. I gave $10 to somebody who needed it or whatever. And it doesn't matter. It could be $500. I'm telling you, $500 is not enough to solve their problem. It's just not. And the amount's not the issue. The thing is that our motivation isn't out of giving them the absolute best that they actually need and what's available to them. And they may not want it. If they don't want it, honor them. If they don't want the help, honor that. Say, okay. We hear I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that heaven is full of people who say to the Lord, thy will be done. And hell is full of people to whom the Lord said, thy will be done. It's this thing where God honors the choices of men. And why shouldn't we? And that's where, okay, if this is what you want, but this comes with consequences, and I'm not going to underwrite and cushion those consequences, that your choice to this thing to avoid consequences. I'm going to let you have the choice. Choosing to be homeless comes with cold nights, hard ground, sunburns, lack of food, scrambling around, getting victimized, all of these things. And if you want out of it, well, guess what? You can get out of it. Come to the Gospel Rescue Mission, and I will help you find your way out of it. And if you're serious, as serious as you are, that's as serious as a change is going to be made. So, and I have never found anybody who put in 100% who did not get 100% success at every level in there. So,
again, good things being said. So we probably have time realistically for one or two more questions, and I want to kick this one off with you. This idea of, obviously we are commanded to help the poor and the needy, the orphans and the widows. The poor and needy that's addressed in Scripture, is that the same poor and needy that we see in our world today? I want to kick that up to you before we go to the professional.
Mr. Talks a lot.
I want to make this a dialogue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think I think I mentioned this in my message too, that I think we do get a little bit, things get hazy for us when we do conflate those things, because even though there's definitely some overlap between what we would say is people who are living that lifestyle of being homeless, there is definitely some overlap between what the Bible would call poor and needy, but not the same category. And really even kind of throughout the Old Testament, the idea of the poor and needy language really kind of had a positive, there was a sense in which people who were poor had to be more dependent on the Lord, and really had nowhere else to look except the Lord. And so there's almost that, so by the time Jesus comes on the scene and says, blessed are the poor in spirit, that was kind of, that connects to the idea of the righteous poor from, really kind of Old Testament tradition. Yeah. So, obviously people, who are homeless have a lot of needs, but not quite the same as, the poor and needy category, I think, in the Bible. And I would say one other thing to that too, which is, one of the things that happens a lot today is we get almost kind of jujitsu'd, where people will throw out a thing like, oh, well, Jesus said, to blessed are the poor, or, Jesus said, I came to proclaim good news to the poor. So therefore, here's my solution to the poor, and you need to do it, which is kind of, Brian was talking about this earlier, where a lot of people will come up and say, I think you need to do this because Jesus said, but you need to do it, not I need to do it. Yeah. And, we saw a lot of it over the last couple of years, even with the phrase love your neighbor, right? It's like it was like this trump card where even if somebody's not a believer, doesn't believe God exists, but they know you're a believer, then they could say, well, just love your neighbor. So what they meant was agree with me on what I think needs to be done, and whether that's public policy or public health policy, or, so people do that with caring for the poor also. Like, it becomes kind of a political thing that people try to use to...
what did you use? Spiritual jujitsu, or to jujitsu you?
Yeah.
All right. Brian, anything extra to add to that?
Yeah, I get people that try and jujitsu me all the time on this stuff, and that's again where I'll throw it back into their lap and say, I do a reverse grip on them and flip them around to where I'm on top, and I just say, hey, well, let's see you do it in your house. It's always kind of been I think the wise pastoral response when somebody says, I've got this great ministry that we, meaning you, Pastor, need to do in our church, because it's your, here, we need to do this, start this ministry. And a good pastor, a seasoned pastor, will say, well, if God's put that on your heart, maybe you should head that up. You know, why don't you start bringing me some ideas and show me how you're going to implement this new ministry, this new children's, boating ministry that you are so passionate about, or whatever.
I get behind a boating ministry.
Yeah, right. And so here we are. I think it's always easier to tell somebody else what they need to do than it is, to actually get in the game and do it. And a lot of times, I remember Mark Driscoll once said something about, he said he was talking about one of the Calvary Chapel pastors. He said, more guys have come to know Christ by this guy than probably all of us in the room. And he said, we all criticize him and everything. And it's like watching somebody pulling people out of a burning building, but we're all standing across the street criticizing them because they're not carrying them right, and stuff like that, talking about doctrinal differences and stuff like that. But I feel the same way about that with ministry like poverty ministries and things like that. It's everybody wants to have a say in how it's done, but very few people want to actually dump their own money and resources and time and effort and energy into it. And when they do, a lot of times what they find out is it's a lot harder than they imagined, and they tend to gas out. And that's just kind of what we see.
Or it's as hard as they thought, which is why they didn't do it
in the first place. Right.
Well, and one thing I would add to that too, and obviously, not you, Brian, because you've obviously put your life into helping people.
Yeah.
But I think that there is the other side where we can say, well, this is justice. This is what you deserve, and it can stop bothering us that people could die of exposure.
Yes.
And that there is a sense in which. And again, not your money's where your mouth is, but I know that I mean, even in myself, I have to check myself. Am I okay with people potentially dying of exposure, in our city?
Absolutely. I'm grateful when people are bothered by that, and I can tell you this, from my staff. And I know every one of them would say the same thing. I mean, every single person that doesn't leave well from a mission or whatever we're doing, people's suffering hurts us. And when we see somebody that, I think of, especially like my women's coordinator, man, God bless her. If you guys don't know Monica Connolly, you need to know her. She's absolutely fantastic. And every women's coordinator I've had before as well. But the idea that, she'll have a mom with 2 kids. They're all young. The kids are young, and they come in for a couple of weeks. They're struggling, but they're kind of holding on. And then all of a sudden, mom relapses, and you have to put mom out, and that means you have to put the kids out, and you have to sit there and look at these kids who you have bonded with, who you have loved, and you have put everything that you can into helping them get back connected with their school and get, you're working on all these things that you're trying to help them with. And now they're sitting there looking at you. You're one more person that's disappointing them when it's really mom's circle of friends that she's still hanging out with that's continually dragging her down, and her bad choices in all of that. So sometimes when we think about somebody's bad choices, I mean, the bad choices don't just affect them. In fact, very rarely do they just affect them. They affect all kinds of people. Every single person that we have in the mission is somebody's son or daughter or brother or sister. They're a father or mother, and there's all kinds of people who are frustrated, who have been wounded by them, and I can tell you right now, man, those are the kinds of things where we meet together. My staff meets together in their office, in my office, or whatever, and we just cry. And we just sit in there and we pray for them, and we don't know what to do anymore, but we can't make them just behave a certain way. And it's not They didn't change just because of the telling. And we told them. We said the stuff that they needed to hear, and we loved on them, and we gave them multiple chances. By the time somebody's getting put out of the Gospel Rescue Mission, they have been warned and told and brought correction to numerous times to try and keep them in there and keep them on task and keep them in the direction towards independence and towards wholeness and things like that, and they've failed at all of that, and it's been not just an ability issue, it's been a will issue, and that's where we end up having to part ways with them, and it is tragic. But the thing is, and it's just like you were saying, I'm glad that it hurts, because that tells you where your heart is in it. It hurts even when they're making you mad, out the door and stuff, and you're staying awake at night and you're losing sleep over it, and that's good, because that tells us, what, we were doing these things for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons.
That's good stuff. Anything to add to that?
Nope.
All right. Well, we are kind of on the final section as we're nearing the hour mark. So what I'm wanting is resources, and I'm tying in the last question, which is basically asking that action steps. Action steps, kind of the what do I do? We've talked about that, so maybe just one final kind of, if you fall in that category of, I want to be intentional with where I'm giving my money or my time, maybe a few options there, and then just even resources. So generally podcast, book, sermon series, whatever. What do you guys have found that have maybe spoken to this for you guys? And I'm not gonna be on Google. I'm gonna be writing down those so that we can put them in our newsletter. So don't think I'm just looking at my sports or anything.
Well, I know Mark and some of the rest of the team has recommended the book When Helping Hurts.
Yeah.
Is that one you?
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a very good one.
So that's a book, and then there's a little bit. The one of the books that we've been kind of recommending throughout this series has been Confronting Injustice Without Compromising Truth. And so there's a little bit of just the disparity question, like when there is economic disparity or racial disparity, is that kind of, how do we process that as believers? So that's a good resource. And then I would say locally, obviously Brian's the expert, but one of the neat things about the Gospel Rescue Mission is that we haven't even talked about is like the food pantry, right? The Rock. And that's a different group of people that
it's a different organization entirely. Yeah.
And serving different people than maybe need the shelter of the mission. And so, you might be somebody that is not, has hard to connect how you might help somebody who's homeless, but there's also a lot of help that the food pantry could use. And then you got the thrift store too, right?
Oh man.
So it's like there's, if you're talking, if someone is at home or in the car or whatever, listening and wondering, man, what's one thing I could do tomorrow? I think just reaching out to the Gospel Rescue Mission or Rock, there's a lot of good that is done in our community through those organizations.
Thank you. That's very good. I would definitely include, the help that, first of all, River Valley is doing with the Uganda ministry. If you're not somebody supporting one of the kids, sponsoring a kid in the Uganda ministries that we're doing here, by all means, talk to Tom, talk to somebody in the church. How can I get started on that? It's a great way. If you want to have a huge bang for your buck, for real poverty in the world, in real abject poverty in the world, making a big difference, life difference for these folks. That's huge. If you want to do something locally, there's a lot of great ministries, and I'll plug both of mine. I'll throw one out that's not mine, but that I'm very sympathetic towards as well. One, obviously, the Gospel Rescue Mission. If you go to grantspassmission.org, you can donate there right off the page. You can also sign up and volunteer if you want to volunteer there. And I've got a ton of different places. I always tell people, tell me what you do regularly. Do that for the glory of God. So if you're an eye doctor, hey man, can you help us with glasses? If you are a pizza maker and, okay, well, we can bring some pizza by, from time to time. I like pizza. The three of us, we like pizza. Yep. And, so I would say do whatever you do for the glory of God and do what comes natural to you, in some way. And that's a good way to find something there. If you're retired and just looking to stay busy, brother, sister, I have got the things for you. And then another place is the Rock Food Pantry. The Rock Food Pantry is a really cool thing because it's not as conceptual. It's very specific. We make bags, we assemble bags of food and we hand it to people who need food because they're struggling with trying to figure out, do I pay my electricity bill or do I feed my kids? And those kinds of things. So, you can go out on a Thursday. We will serve somewhere around anywhere to 200 to 400 folks on a given Thursday afternoon. In fact, we're starting early in the morning doing home deliveries. We're the only food pantry in Josephine County that does regular home deliveries of groceries and everything. We're open 2 days a week for our distributions, but we work there Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to noon. I have got all kinds of opportunities there. If you're a yard sailor, I've got a yard sale over there that I desperately need people who love working yard sales. I despise working yard sales, but I love that we have a working yard sale because that's a great source of revenue for helping put food in our people's mouths and stuff like that. Every $5 that you spend at the Rocks Backdoor Bargains yard sale basically puts a week's worth of groceries on a family's table and stuff. I mean, it is really an amazing
How does that
thing.
work? $5?
I can get
a
it
week?
for so cheap, man. Yep, $5 a week, I can get 2 big bags of groceries and a bunch of other good stuff. You really should check it out. And it's real satisfying, super easy. That's ROCHOME.org. If you want to know more details there, that's fantastic. And then another ministry in town that's really great, and this is a kind of a Calvary Chapel ministry, but it's U-Turn for Christ. U-Turn for Christ is another great discipleship, homeless, addiction recovery kind of a ministry. They do very similar to work to the Gospel Rescue Mission. I love Kevin Darr over there. If you go and you look at missionlive.net, look at the videos that we've had. I've done several interviews with Kevin. He's a great brother. They've got great work. Check them out. Love what you're doing. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about poverty in our area especially.
No, and that's good. We're glad to have you on. And if you're listening and you want to know more, Brian is a reachable guy. Would love to sit down and talk with you. Again, great resources. Go to the website. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we've done what we can here. Any last parting thoughts? All right. Brian and Brian, can't wait to see your first album on the road in your new band. Thank you very much for joining us. Won't be the last. Catch us next week, listeners, as we wrap up our cross-culture series on race. See you then.